joining us today for our webinar on PCI compliance for merchants. All of us who acquire credit card data have to be PCI compliant. But what does it actually mean? What should I do? What if I don't? We have today our expert, Mr. Greg Landecki from SC2 Labs. This is a company who resides in Poland but operates worldwide. He will answer all your questions, the ones that you asked when you registered for the webinar, but also those ones that arise during the presentation. So let me introduce Greg to you. He is a Director of Information Security Department at SC2 Labs and is extremely experienced and knowledgeable on PCI compliance. He will answer questions that are directly connected with you, merchants. Greg, can you say something about yourself?
Hello, my name is Greg Landecki, and I'm most of all PCI QSA, PA QSA, and PCI ASV auditor. So actually, I'm working in the field with merchants and with service providers to help them achieve PCI compliance and to check if their security measures are PCI DSS compliant.
PayLane cooperates with SC2 Labs as well, and we benefited greatly from their advice, so we recommend listening to what they have to say. Okay, so what's our schedule for today? First, Greg will answer the questions that were provided in the register form. And by the way, if you see your question, yell in the chat box. And then we will have additional Q&A question session at the very end. Oh, and this webinar is being recorded, so you can download it later. But remember, you have the opportunity to ask question only now. Okay, and one more thing. I would like to make some visual and sound check. So if you hear me and see me properly, can you write it in the chat box? You can write, for example, where are you from? Okay. Oh. All right. Okay, great having you all here. Give me some space down there because I'm joining you and I'll be listening to Greg as well. All right, Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pat. So again, welcome. Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you all. First of all, I received a lot of questions from Pat, so I don't know if we will be able to answer all of them, but we will try. Maybe if you are interested in this kind of webinar, we can organize that, again, or we can answer that offline and send you answer by email. First of all, before we actually start answering the questions, a few words about the PCI. So the PCI SSC, Security Standard Council, was founded by 5 big card names: Visa, MasterCard, Discover, JVC, American Express, and they are actually the founders of the PCI. So those PCI rules are actually created by those payment brands. And PCI, it's not only PCI DSS, as you know, but it's a family of standards. So there are certain standards for devices, for terminals, like PCI PTS, or applications that resides on those terminals, or even payment gateways. This is PA DSS, point-to-point encryption, PCI PIN security, PCI HSM, a lot of different standards, but we will be actually talking about the main one, the PCI, and most known one, PCI DSS for merchants. One more slide about PCI is what is really PCI DSS. This is a very scary name usually, but PCI usually means it is all the best practices. So it is based on ISO standards. It is actually, it implements some kind of national and industry best practices and recommendations. And also, what is probably the most important thing is it includes some requirements from the post-attack forensic examinations and lessons learned. So PCI is evolving. It's introducing every 2-3 years some requirements that are actually because there was some kind of attacks going on. So not a big deal. These are 12 PCI DSS requirements. Let's go very quickly through them. So first requirement is about firewall. You have to have secure network, secure firewall, DMZ zone. Second requirement is all about hardening the systems. So not using default settings, not using default users, not using admin for your system to log in, and to those kind of services that you don't use must be, well, usually they have to be switched off. Requirement number 3 is to protect, if you store the data, protect the card numbers. So encrypt them or mask them or delete them if you don't use it. And this is requirement number 3. Requirement number 4 is about encrypting the data. So we were talking about protection. Right now, it is the requirement number 4 is about encrypting the data in transmission. Requirement number 5, use of antivirus on the systems that are commonly affected. Requirement number 6, update the systems, and if you are creating some kind of payment application, there are additional requirements, how to securely develop the application, how to use secure coding techniques, etc. Requirement number 7 is access, so limit access to card data for only personnel that really needs to access. And requirement number 8 is all about accounts. Don't use default accounts. Use some passwords. Have some password policy. Have two-factor authentication for remote management, etc. Requirement number 9 is all about physical access. So restricting physical access to machines, physical machines. Requirement number 10 is track, log what is going on, the systems, synchronize time, etc. Requirement number 11, test security measurements. And requirement number 12 is maintain the security policies and procedures. All of those requirements, as you can see, they are basic security requirements and basic practices. It is hard to imagine someone, a server without a firewall or without antivirus, for example, Windows. Okay, but let's go to your questions. So, as I told you, I received a lot of similar questions. So basically, what is the process, what I need, how to be PCI compliant, what it will cost me, etc., etc. So I will try to answer those questions in batches. So, for example, those 6 questions. First of all, is what do I require to be PCI compliant? And PCI requirements are really the same for everyone. The same for everyone and the same for EU, Czech Republic, Poland, US, all the same. Of course, they cannot supersede the law, so regulations have to be, local regulations have to be first. But because of merchants and obviously businesses differ, PCI or car brands divided, in this case, merchants to levels. So the top level, level 1, is for merchants that have over 6 million transactions annually. So it's a lot of transactions. So it is basically over 2,500 transactions per hour, as far as I'm counting correctly. But it is something like two transactions. Well, 1 million transaction is about 2 transactions per minute, every minute in a year. So it's a lot of transactions. So for this high level, over 1 million, over 6 millions, PCI or card brands, they will require on-site full audit. So it means that the auditor will come to your site and it will check everything. And usually every requirement has to be, well, there are over 350, as far as I remember, sub-requirements. So every requirement needs to be compliant and need to be positively checked to be for the merchant or service provider to be PCI compliant. However, for the lower categories, like level 3 or level 4, usually PCI, it is not needed usually to have an auditor on site, and something like SAQs were invented. So, talking about e-commerce, because PayLane customers mostly are e-commerce customers, usually depends on the technology you use. You have limited requirements to, for example, SAQA. So if you are using full redirect to the PayLane payment page, you will have only 22 requirements out of 300 to be compliant with PCI DSS at your level. So if you are eligible for SAQA, you have only 22 to, well, it's easy to document, and you have only 22 requirements. If you are using other technologies, so for example, JavaScript or API or totally other methods, or if you are storing the card data, yes, a lot more requirements will be well, required from you to secure. So basically, those SAQs, we can talk about them later, but those are basically created for the merchants, not to have the whole over 300 requirements. So quickly, let's take a look at the service providers. Service providers are not merchants, other companies that are processing the card data. The limit is set up for 300,000 transactions annually, and they will require full audit. So how you can check what would be required from you as a merchant? Usually, there are plenty of documentations So Visa created some kind of merchant guideline for e-commerce merchants with detailed diagrams how what technology requires what. Okay, so you've got the link below here to download this kind of materials, or even better, it is newly from yesterday. Yesterday, PCI published the brand new best practices for securing e-commerce, and in this document, it's really very good document. You can find description for every technology, so you can really see how easy it is to implement different methods, and actually what would be required from you to be PCI DSS compliant. So this is very interesting document. One of the question also was, okay, what about cloud hosting and cloud services? Well, yes, some of the cloud solutions, they do have, well, they are PCI DSS compliant. So what it means is that they are compliant as service provider level 1. So auditor went to those data centers and checked if they are compliant. And be sure only, because not every Amazon, for example, service is PCI DSS compliant. So please check and please require from the cloud hosting services or the cloud hosting companies PCI services. Probably they will be more restricted, but functionally we audit every year a lot of solutions or a lot of businesses that have presence in the cloud. Even it was not the part of the questions, but the typical recent question is it possible to have, for example, Dockers in PCI compliant environment? Well, it is possible. It is possible under some circumstances, but it is possible. But it has to be very well designed. Okay, but it is not actually the topic for today's conversation, but it is possible. So one more thing about how you can achieve the compliance. So if you have a requirement, the requirement usually, well, this slide is about on-site report, but usually you will have to report it as the requirement as being in place with compensation controls, not in place, not applicable, and not tested is only if, for example, you have a data center only collocation services, so you will be, for example, reporting only physical security. So some the typical question is, okay, do I have to fulfill all the requirements? And usually I'm saying yes, well, all applicable. So obviously some requirements are created for the companies, like having some requirements are for physical, for example, ATMs, right? So if your company is an e-commerce company, obviously all those requirements about ATMs will not be applicable to you, right? There also applies for compensation controls. So if you cannot fulfill the requirement for whatever reason, for example, many banks, they do have old mainframes, old huge computers And usually those mainframes, they do not support strong encryption methods like SSH or something like that. They use telnet still. And implementing SSH on those machines would not be very efficient. So usually they, for example, they are using some compensation control methods. For example, putting administrators' workstations in a separate VLAN, encryption using some tunnels, etc., etc. So it is possible to have some compensating controls in place of the requirement. However, those compensation methods have to be usually more than the original requirement. So it is easier actually to fulfill the requirement as it is. The next, well, the most of the questions I received was, okay, how much does it cost to be PCI compliant? And the answer is, it depends. Because for a small merchant, it is usually the cost of performing SAQ, so self-assessment. Plus, it can be done internally. It's not a problem. Plus, a cost of PCI ASV scanning. So if you have a business, usually a small business, small shop with one IP, for example, usually the cost will be not more than 200-300 euro per year. So it's not millions as some say. Okay, some problems on the lines, I think. Right now, can you hear me? Okay, good. So back to the topic. So for the bigger merchants, of course, they will have multinational locations. They will have probably a lot of transactions. They will have a lot of other resources. It will cost probably more because the risk is a lot higher. The small merchant, okay, they can process as well. That's why card brands, they created levels. So for small merchants, the level of transactions will be smaller. So the risk is smaller, and that's why we require less. For the bigger merchants, the risk is higher because you can easily hear from the news. Target reached 40 million cards lost. Yahoo, other customers, those are huge losses. Just to imagine how big the loss is, it is estimated that the production of cards, of a new card, it is around $3 to $5. So if you lose 1 million cards, they need to be recreated. So you need to block those cards and issue the new ones to the customers. And each of the cards will cost you, for example, $3 to $5. So if you lose 1 million cards, the bank will have to pay $3 to $5 million. And we are not talking about the fraud anymore. We are talking only about reissuing the cards. So the losses are really, really big. So, you know, it is very hard to estimate, you know, the cost from merchant to merchant without knowing the environment. So we usually, to our customers, we are issuing something what is called the scoping document. They are completing the document saying, okay, what they really use and what are the environment, and then we can actually define what work is needed, you know, and of course associated costs. Okay. Next question is usually how long does it take to perform an audit? For small to medium organizations, usually we try to fit in 1 week scenario, so 1 week agenda. So you have this typical agenda in front of you right now. Basically, well, of course, in the big banks or bigger organizations, it can take weeks or even months to complete an audit. But if the organization is prepared, and we are talking about the full audit here, usually it will take a week worth of work assessment audit on site, and probably 1 week or 2 weeks to prepare the report, to review all the documentation, etc., etc. Quickly, other questions. Why, despite all the efforts, why we still have some frauds? Well, basically, the answer is simple. Not all of the people care about security. So that's the first thing. And usually, so that's why Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they invented this security standard for everyone to be on the same page, right? So some question, well, there are some criticism about the PCI DSS, and some say, okay, well, it is not really good because there are a lot of requirements. Usually, the good security standard will come from the risk assessment. So, what risk applies to me? And yes, I do agree. But usually, the companies will tell, okay, so we will accept all the risk, and so we don't have to do anything. Some companies believe, some companies will do like that because money and, you know, the profit is more important than actually the security. Okay, and usually they will pay the price sooner or later because they will be victims of some kind of fraud or data leak, and then Visa will charge them some penalties, which are very, very high, and also they will face the legal accusations and the legal way from the insurance companies, from the banks, because they caused the losses. Okay. So this is kind of combined with this question. I don't need to be PCI compliant. Well, as I said, these are the best practices. And if you think you don't have to have a firewall on the internet, well, probably you are not very smart enough, right? Then I can wait until my bank asks me to be PCI compliant, or even some customers are saying, that I refuse to cooperate, right? Well, this is not the law. PCI is not the law, and you won't go to jail immediately if you are not compliant. But you are endangering yourself, and usually, if compromised, you will face some fines, and it will hurt. We have some customers that unfortunately they have some breaches. The customers are immediately promoted to level 1, so they need to have the full audit, and usually those are those breaches are caused by really very stupid mistakes and very common mistakes, like using common passwords, like not updating the for example, some technologies like WordPress or PHP or something like that. Very, very common scenarios in attacks. Okay, we are going quickly out of time. So, next questions: how to safeguard merchants from stored card reauthorizing? This is very, very interesting topic. Usually, the best way is not to store the card. So some methods of, for example, using tokens were implemented. So actually the responsibility is shifted to the acquirer, and the merchant operates on the token. So token is something, well, it's not like card data. So it might be a reference number, it might be some unique, might be a random number even. And this number is used to communicate that the customer using this payment ID token would like to pay, to make a payment. Then it is forwarded to acquirer. Acquirer then exchanges this token to a card number and then process the transaction. So this is the easiest method, but we don't have time to really talk about this method today. But if you are interested, we can organize something like a new webinar to talk exclusively about that. Another question: I have a small online tech support business. Does it meet the PCI compliance? Well, there are a lot of, well, PCI is kind of very trendy right now, as I can say. So I can see, a lot of, for example, this router is PCI DSS compliant, or this device is PCI DSS compliant. Well, or my service, something I invented, is PCI DSS compliant. Well, there's no such thing as PCI DSS compliant router or switch or server. This is not the way PCI works. Well, it depends. If something is transmitting or processing or storing card data, like a POS terminal, probably it is PCI DSS compliant, because well, actually it is PCI PTS compliant, the other standard I told you about. But usually, not all of the businesses need to be PCI compliant. But on the case-to-case basis, the common sense is, if you are processing the card numbers, or if you have access to a large amount of card numbers, or if you have you are otherwise involved in the card business, you probably will need to be PCI compliant, but in most cases SAQ will be enough. Okay. What specific requirements are for EU? I suppose it is Czech Republic, and as I told you, I answered this question before. Requirements are the same. Of course, for some for some countries or states, there are some local legal regulations, and they cannot, well, PCI cannot supersede or be above the law. So those local regulations will come first. So if your government, for example, will ban strong encryption and will only allow, I don't know, single death, well, you will have to use the single death instead, right? But we are just, you know, I don't know the country who is not allowing that, but you know, maybe North Korea. But you know, usually the requirements are the same for all from PCI DSS perspective. And last but not least question, what measures are needed to stay compliant with PCI when using PayLane? It depends. It depends because it depends on what kind of business do you have, if you are storing or not storing card data, if you are, well, everything is possible. As I said, you know, if you are just outsourcing to PayLane and, for example, using the full redirect, basically you will have to fill SAQA form, so 22 requirements, and that's it. If you are using different technologies or you have something else in mind, well, basically it's best to contact support at paylane.com or your account manager to answer all your questions. So I've got that prepared for the short time I've got, you know, so maybe let's back to Pat to ask some questions you have during the session.
Okay, so that's me again, and I'll read out your questions. So the first question is, can I host the application in-house? Do I have to use third-party like AWS for hosting, and what is the requirement for that?
Okay, so you can build your own applications, not a problem. Probably you will have to think about security, and as I said, you can host it in AWS, but then it is very important to request from AWS the PCI compliant hosting. Usually they have a lot of services like that, and they will give you a formal document that will say, okay, it is for your company, and it will say, okay, you have the PCI compliant hosting. So yes, it is possible.
Right, thanks for that. Another question. In the requirement 4.1, it stated that use strong cryptography and security protocols to safeguard sensitive cardholder data during transmission over open public networks, including the following. Entrusted keys and certificates are accepted, and so on. And the question is, does this mean that for the VPN IPS-EC connection, it's allowed to use pre-shared keys, and I'm still compliant with PCI DSS?
Yes, it is. Yep. Well, the strong encryption means single death is not allowed, or you know other ciphers not considered secure. Well, PCI is actually using industry best practices and standards. So you have to look at the NIST website probably, or there's a good website as well called keylength.com. So www.keylength.com. I will I don't know if I can write on the screen. No, whatever. I can send it later, right? So you have there on this website, you have all the security ciphers and algorithms on one page. You can compare it. But what about? It is a common question. What about the untrusted SSL certificates or untrusted or shared keys? So basically, you can use the shared key. It's not a problem. Well, be sure that it is long enough and not shared anywhere, not published on the website or something like that, and used from encryption, and your VPN will be secured. It's not a problem. Remember that usually for remote access, PCI requires two-factor authentication. So, and from PCI version 3.2, any administrative access will have to be two-factor authenticated. But if you like yourself using, for example, untrusted SSL certificates for your VPN, it's also possible. It doesn't mean that it is not secure, but you have to, of course, be sure that you don't use, for example, untrusted certificates for your merchants because, or for your customers, because then, of course, it will look very suspicious.
Greg, I think you can type the name of the website in the chat box. Can you try that?
Yeah.
Okay, there it is. Thanks. Okay, so there was a question about staying PCI compliant while using recurring payment method. This is payment method available at PayLane, and what kind of PCI compliance requirements should be fulfilled by a merchant when he is using that?
It depends. It depends of what payment methods, how many transactions, and I would rather answer that at looking at the real scenario. So if we can discuss that and return to your customer, because it's very hard. I don't want to make some false statements.
Okay, I think that question came from Jan. So Jan, if you can contact SC2 Labs, that would be great. And another question about penetration testing. Is there any software that you recommend for that?
Well, usually I don't recommend any particular software because when doing penetration testing, usually you're using multiple methods and tools. The most known one probably is Metasploit, and Metasploit is known to be good. But if you are performing penetration testing using only Metasploit, I would say it's not enough. You should be using some kind of range of different tools. Burp Pro is very good as well. Well, all the tools available in Kali Linux also. It is a very good distribution with a lot of penetration testing tools. But usually it depends on what you are trying to achieve. For example, if you are trying to do some kind of network penetration testing or application or a specific technology like ASP or PHP or whatever. So it all depends. What I can say for sure, there is no one tool that will fit all needs.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, maybe a few more. Is it enough to use low price MikroTik I hope I'm getting this right, as a firewall, or do I have to buy Cisco ASA?
Well, it depends on what you are trying to, again, what you are trying to achieve. You know, the main requirement for the PCI is to have a firewall which can which will be stateful, okay, and you can accomplish that even on the router, but it will be very, very basic. Well, you don't have to buy Cisco ASA if you don't want to, because it is expensive, okay. However, I would recommend to buy, you know, something more than MikroTik, because MikroTik usually it's only rather a router than a firewall, actually. But if you would like to secure your network on the basic level, yes, probably, you know, it would be enough on the basics. And will it be acceptable for the from the PCI perspective? For the small merchants, maybe yes. For bigger, I would say it's not enough.
Okay. Another question. Can I store credit card data on user device, like Android app, instead of our server?
Well, there are some interesting methods. Usually, you know, the customer device is can be considered as well something that's owned by the customer. So card holder really holds the card, and on the cards there are, you know, plain numbers with the plain text, so it's not encrypted on the card or on the physical card. However, there are some other funny methods. Some our customers that I know, they, for example, use this method to. So the customer is, for example, entering the card number, and they are encrypting that with the public key, which is held on the servers. So actually, on the application they have a cryptogram which cannot be decrypted because the decryption key is located on the merchant side. Other merchants even go further and saying that, okay, well, we will create for example, a cryptogram and cut this cryptogram in half. This way, you know, we will store 1/2 of the cryptogram and the customer will store the other half of the cryptogram. No one can decrypt that because no one has, you know, the whole cryptogram. And upon, you know, making transaction, the customer will send the part of the cryptogram. It will be decrypted. The card will be known, and then it will be sent for processing, right? But usually, well, every time we are talking about encryption, decryption, it is very, very important that you will have to fall into the ASAQD category, so the full compliance. So you will have to fulfill all the requirements about the storing the keys, generating strong keys, distributing store keys, having some kind of protection of for example, replacing the keys, etc., etc. So basically, most of the customers, most of the merchants, they will go to tokenization, the thing I talked about earlier. So not using encryption at all, just, you know, shifting the liability for storing the card data to acquire, for example, and then they will operate only on tokens. And most applications, most mobile applications, will hold tokens. So it is not considered the card data. So you don't have to fulfill all the requirements.
All right. So maybe perhaps the last question for today. What is the reason to be formally PCI compliant and invest into that? If in case of fraud breaches, you are still fully responsible for any accompanying losses, regardless of whether you were PCI certified or not. Being PCI compliant doesn't release business from a liability anyway, correct?
Not correct, I would say. First of all, it depends on your agreement. Some acquirers, they do have this kind of agreements that if you are fully PCI compliant and you have that confirmed by independent auditor, first thing is that well, you show proper due care and due diligence. So your liability is actually very low. Second thing is that, of course, by signing, for example, SAQA, right, you are saying that you are not processing the card data, and all your the whole card processing is you actually outsource to a third party, a compliant service provider. So you can be liable if it is found that you are storing the data, right? So you are actually your statement was wrong, right? But there are some programs also, like for example Visa Safe Harbor. Visa Safe Harbor says that if acquirer is PCI compliant, and it is confirmed every year, and acquirer has all certified merchants, and they do pay due care and due diligence, to security, Visa will not issue any penalties to those acquirers. So actually, if there are no penalties to acquire, there are no penalties to the merchants, because there's nothing to shift to the merchants. So basically, it is not true that you are fully liable if you are PCI compliant. Actually, if you were audited, for example, by our company, SC2 Labs, and you will have a breach, you can say, okay, well, I did pay a lot to being secure. Even I've checked, I was checked by third-party auditors, and we as the auditors, we have to have a huge insurance for our errors in case we make some errors. So we have some, well, PCI, SSC, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they require from us to have some amazing insurance in case that we check something that is not secure, and we report that. So you can shift some of the liability to auditors as well, if not all, actually.
All right. I would like to add two things. First thing is that PayLane is PCI compliant. We are a service provider level 1, and every year we undergo an audit, and we get our certification every year. And the second thing is what Greg actually said before, is that if you are our merchant, you also have to be PCI compliant, but it depends on how you are integrated with us. So if you are using our secure form, you are obliged to fulfill SAQA. If you are integrated via API, and in case you are using the JavaScript option, you have to fill the SAQ EP, I guess. And in case of using full API, you have to use fulfill SAQD. With other questions regarding PCI compliance for our merchants, please contact our account manager and we will answer all your questions. Okay, Greg, is there anything you would like to add at the end?
Well, I would like to thank you for all the questions, and if you find this interesting and helpful, please tell Pat. Maybe we can organize something like that in future and discuss other topics. We are open for your questions, and if you have anything, let us know.
Yep, they already expressed an interest in tokenization, so I'm guessing this will be our first project. I would also like to thank you, Greg, for sharing your knowledge with us. Hope to see you soon. Many thanks to our participants. You asked fantastic questions, and hope to see you in the near future in our next webinar. In case you have any other questions or doubts, you can contact us. Our contact details are visible on the screen. And apart from that, well, have a great day and see you. Bye.
Have a nice one.